Ey, hablar mal de mí es mala suerte. Yo no rezo, pero mami lo hace por mí pa' que Dios no me suelte. Mucha lana, muchas damas, mucho hater, porque estamos arriba, estamos arriba, estamos arriba. Ey, ey, la envidia no nos derriba, loco, porque estamos arriba, estamos arriba, estamos arriba. Ey, ey, mano arriba, mano arriba.
Money, baby, Young Kings, ey. Estamos arriba, ahora vestimos con marcas exclusivas. Tratamos las Balenciagas con Adidas. Hay par de cabrones que quisieran mi vida. Las baby llegando al lobby, nosotros en la suite. Ya no hay que pedir el sí, leyenda la que nací. El precio sube cada vez que preguntan por fin. Y ya se me dio por fin, yo a nadie me le torcí. Todos los que se viraron ahora están arrepentidos. Mis versos parecen kilos, multimillón me retiro. Y siempre que voy pa' la calle, bendición jamás les pido. Líbrame del agua mansa, Dios, yo del otro me cuido. Estoy arriba los kayak, trepado en la estatua de la libertad. Y el ya te ready pa' cuando de esto me quiera desconectar. Futuro brillante por delante que a algunos les puede molestar. Por eso ahora estas mujeres hasta piden por detrás.
¿Por qué? Porque estamos arriba, estamos arriba, estamos arriba. Ay, ay, la envidia no nos derriba, loco, porque estamos arriba, estamos arriba, estamos arriba. Ay, ay,
la envidia no nos derriba, papi, porque estamos arriba, estamos arriba, estamos arriba, ey. Seguiré matando la liga hasta que papá Dios decide y todas estas putas se quieren trepar arriba, ey. Trepar arriba.
Le trajo un flow nuevo pa' que le den copy. Un piquete cabrón desde que yo era un popi. Me miran raro como caco dentro de Hot Topic. Ninguno sale con Tito y mucho menos yo pi. Y aquí nadie le importa con quién tú te pases. Lo mío es dar jonrón pa' vaciar las bases. Te hace falta el amor, te hace falta clase. Y yo Luis Butón desde las botas hasta las sunglasses. Que tenemos en los echados, le pasé por la escuchao. Soy lo más hijueputa que has escuchado, ey. Yo siempre picheo y conmigo se van ponchados, ey. Mi récord está limpio, por nadie me lo ha manchado, ey. Ey. Yo brillo y ellos se muerden. Si quieres te enseño cómo es que se hace. Que hable mal de mí no me sorprende. Que Dios me los bendiga como quiera. Estamos arriba, estamos arriba, estamos arriba.
Estamos arriba, ey. La envidia no nos derriba, papi, porque estamos arriba, estamos arriba, estamos arriba, ey.
Pongan la copa para arriba, ¿por qué? Porque estamos arriba, estamos arriba. Ay, ay, la envidia no nos derriba, loco, porque estamos arriba, estamos arriba, estamos arriba.
Estamos arriba,
ay, mano arriba, mano arriba.
We Japanese still. You can cook in front of your family like a Japanese meal. It's Yashub the Hibachi, and none of you niggas can stop me. But can't help but watch me. So look, bro. I'm back on my YouTube 90, YouTube grimy. Listen, man. As promised, this needed to be done so we can put to bed this argument, with academics, with genetic and science and haplogroup understanding. We can put to bed the argument that it's probably going on 30, 40 years strong. This 12 tribes chart thing that's permeated the interweb, or whatever you want to call it, the Aeta. And what we have now is a bunch of people that are following an ideology that is pretty much bursting at the seams and is no longer seen as credible. And the reason why, because it's not congruent with the evidence that lies within each of every one of us, which is what is known as DNA. What is DNA? DNA is the information and data that creates you. What makes you you is what we know as DNA. It is a code that builds body plans, that builds who you are, and we can use DNA to track ancestry. Why is that important? How is that even relevant to the discussion of what some random Black Hebrew Israelite made up in America? Well, you have Black Hebrew Israelites, BHIs, One West Camp Israelites, and people that follow the ideology, teaching that the people on the 12 tribes chart all descend from one man named Jacob. And it's very simple. If they all descend from one man named Jacob, then they all should share the same Y chromosome. This is not a doctrine. This is not an ideological bout or a religious or anything dealing with your belief in God. It has nothing to do with it. What it has something to do with it has nothing to do with your religiosity or what God you believe in or what camp you're in, but it has everything to do with what we call DNA. Has everything to do with the sperm cell that was responsible for birthing you. It has everything to do with the information that creates you and I, which is known as DNA, which is in all your cells. You had someone by the name of Gorilla Hebrew saying, I don't believe that a swab of spit can show me my ancestry. But if he would have paid attention in middle school science class, biology class, he would learn that every cell in your body has a copy of your DNA. This is why you can get tracked down in a crime and charged for a crime via skin cells, hair cells. You can extract DNA from those things because everything that's on and in your body, everything that's on and in your body has a copy of your DNA because everything that's on and in your body is made up of what we call somatic cells. Somatic deals with the body, so your eyes, your skin, which your skin is the largest organ on your body. Something else you should have learned in middle school biology. Everything in your body has a copy of it. So yes, when you take a DNA test and they ask you to spit in the tube, that is a viable way to obtain your DNA and track ancestry. We say these things, but these camps will claim that the white man is the one that's tricking us. The school system is the one that's distorting history. The school system is the one that's leading us astray. But that's just not the case. The people that are leading us astray are you Black Hebrew Israelites, you Afrocentrics. You scam artists on the internet. And not just money, you're scamming people for their mind and their time by telling and selling them falsehoods like the 12 tribes chart. So again, the 12 tribes chart, the primary claim, the overarching theme of the 12 tribes chart is to get the people that are in their churches, that are on the internet watching, to get them to believe that everybody on that chart descends from one man named Jacob. And again, that one man has a Y chromosome, and he gave that Y chromosome to his children through the act of sex, through reproduction. The only way your son is going to get your Y chromosome is if that's your son, and your sperm cell is what impregnated that egg inside that woman. That's the only way. That is the only way. So in order for you to say that everybody on that list or the 12 tribes chart are descendants of Jacob, one thing must be true, that they all must share the same Y chromosome. If that is not true, then the entire claim for the chart is dismantled and refuted. And as we've been showing on the episodes prior to this, that is emphatic, that is definitive at this point, that Mexicans themselves are a mixed bag. They are a hodgepodge group. They share several different Y chromosomes meaning they themselves descend from different groups of males, ultimately meaning that they all can't be descendants of a man named Issachar that lived in the Levant in the Bronze Age. You understand? So again, your church leaders, your Israelite leaders, these guys are not teaching you biology. They're not teaching you science. They're not teaching you world history. And hell, they're not even teaching geography because now you have Black Hebrew Israelites teaching that the land of Israel is in Africa somewhere. They distort geography. They distort how ancestry works. They distort science because they want more followers and they want more money in their pocket. And that's it. It has nothing to do with, giving the correct information. But that's what you got me here for. And that's why the channel is going to remain small. My channel actually has 1 million views, but my views were up when I was teaching 12 Tribes Chart, when I was teaching Black Hebrew Israelite ideology. I had thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of views. I'd rather teach someone the correct information and rather deal with those 1 to 2 or 3 individuals that are going to actually learn and appreciate actual science, actual methodology, and employing that, than having a bunch of followers and misleading them and teaching them Black Hebrew Israelite ideology, which is idiocy at its finest. So we're going to get right into it. So who are the Mexicans? Because if you asked, I don't know, Captain Zariak from ISUPK, Captain Zariak will tell you that they are the children of Issachar. And then he will proceed to go into some kind of prophetic message in the Bible and read a verse in Genesis. Shout out to the channel name, Genesis 49ers. He'll go to Genesis 49. He'll break that down. Deuteronomy 33, Deuteronomy 28. He will say that they fit the curses. See, all these things that we fall for have nothing to do with ancestry. Well, that has nothing to do. What people do is they treat these verses as if the verses themselves are DNA tests. Deuteronomy 28 has nothing to do with the people of Mexico, the land of Mexico, has nothing to do with the Americas. This is something that was written thousands of years ago, and it pertained to people living in the Levantine Basin. That's it. But you get modern people today concocting their own distorted version of history and creating this history and galvanizing behind it and creating a movement. And that's what we get from the Black Hebrew Israelites. You get this movement via the 12 Tribes Chart. You get One West. You get all of the different factions and branches that come from that, and people that follow the ideology. I myself followed the ideology for quite some time. It's all documented and recorded. You can go back and look at my older videos and see me spewing this garbage, right? But it's always time to go back and address these things. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to the website. I'm so sorry, y'all. I'm coming off that bug. But anyway, we're going to go to IsraelUnite.org. And we're going to address point for point. Excuse me. Let me get something to drink, y'all. Just bear with me, y'all. I've been battling that all week, so man, I'm gonna need to get a reader in here, man. They were like, yeah, the Most High stopping them from breaking down, destroying the chart. So we're gonna go to IsraelUnite.org. And as you can see, I'm not, lying on these people. I'm not misrepresenting these people. They literally teach that Issachar are the present day Mexicans. And again, why is this problematic? The reason why it's problematic, let me take this off the screen so you can see. The reason why this is problematic is they don't understand one thing, and this was most of these groups do, not just Black Hebrew Israelites, Afrocentrics in general. They don't understand this word right here. The word is diversity. They don't understand that, most people are homogenous. Most humans are homogenous. And why are they homogenous? Because most people move, they travel, they migrate, they mix, they have sex. And what that does is produce diverse populations. And through a process known as meiosis, you get, because you can have a small group of people, which we all come from. We all come from a small group of people that lived in the distant past, let's say 100 to 200,000 years ago. And as they spread out and migrated and went to different environments, as they spread out and did that, they became more diverse. And then other people would migrate along with them, mix, and through the process of meiosis, because when you have sex and you get a woman pregnant, you're not making a clone of yourself. You're not making a clone of yourself. Your genes and her genes are being traded with each other. They're shifting, and it's a random process. And gene conversion happens. And then you create that child. This is why only 50% of your child's DNA would be similar to yours, to each parent. Not 100%. 100% will be a clone. You're not making a clone. So this explains why we all come from a common stock of people, but we have differences in look, differences in hair texture, different eye shape, nose shape, different bone structure, morphology. And this goes back to that word people don't understand in this sphere: diversity. We're not all the same. We are distinct from each other because we are diverse. Why are we diverse? Because the way our genetics work, we don't make clones, right? Our children will always be a mixture, not a clone. And you get people that lived in a distant past. Again, I explained this before. The deeper you go into the human history, the darker the humans get. They're dark brown. The whole world was brown at one point. But so how do you explain pale skinned people? It's because we don't make clones. That comes from the process of mixing and moving and migrating. And eventually that gene and that variation expressed itself. I have to always preach about this because for some reason in these circles and these spheres, they think everyone's the same. And they use these scrupulous means to say that, hey, these people are the same. Oh, they're all called Mexicans, so they're the same. Oh, they all have a similar look, so they're the same. No, they're not. They're diverse. These people have a very unique and diverse history and admixture amongst them, which we're going to break down today. Now, IsraelUnite.org, they believe that all the people that are classified as Mexican, that have this national origin or title that's associated with them, all magically culminate in the sin from one man named Issachar. Now, what is the issue with that? One man named Issachar, that means he has one Y chromosome. So therefore, we should see consanguinity amongst Mexicans. We should see homogeny amongst Mexicans. They should all have the same Y chromosome marker. Same exact one, same clade, same branch. Because the only way you can get that is through the act of sex. That's the only way you can trace male ancestry. You don't trace it through reading Bible verses. You don't trace it through prophecy. You don't trace it that way. Those are not DNA tests. You don't trace it by looking at old Aztec paintings and saying, oh, well, there's black Aztecs here and dark Aztecs here. So therefore, no, you don't use those things. Those things mean nothing. So what if there were darker skinned Aztecs and Mayans? It means zero. That does not tell you who they directly descend from or whether or not your idea of them being Israelites during the time of the Assyrian occupation, which is what they teach. They teach that Mexicans are the product of Israelites fleeing during the time of the Assyrian conquest of the Levant And they fled over here around the 8th century BCE. They took ships and they all sailed to a land that no man ever came before. They go to 2nd Ezra 13. That also cannot be proven. And we're going to show why that's not proven. Because these people, when we're dealing with the indigenous component of these people, the people that actually descend from indigenous Aztecs, indigenous Americans, Mesoamericans, they have been here longer than the Aztec conquest. The Aztec conquest happens around 8th century BCE. They were here 4,000 years ago. They were here 2,000 BCE, 3,000 BCE, 4,000 BCE, 5,000 BCE. So that part of the narrative cannot be backed up and justified and proved. This is why this is a refutation, not a debunking video. Anyway, as you can see on the screen, they believe that Issachar was called Aztecs in the Middle Ages. So they're trying to compare the Aztecs to the man named Issachar, the son of Jacob in the Bible. Present day name Mexicans. Location today, Mexico and scattered regions of the earth. I'm so sorry, y'all. Just bear with me. Lineage. Issachar was the 9th-born son of Jacob. His mother was Leah. His name means he is hired. And that's a big, part of the folklore. They were, oh, Mexicans work hard. They always get jobs. So therefore, he is hired as a fitting name for him. And it's prophetic. It's a nomen omen. It's a name that's supposed to be, prophecy of his progeny, saying, hey, your children are going to be known to work. So therefore, who else is a better fitting people to fit this than Mexican? This is the argument. I used to teach this dumb stuff, and it's garbage. Again, this is not a DNA test. There are plenty of groups that are hardworking. A lot of them are Asian. Does that mean that they descend from somebody, from the Bronze Age Levant? No, it does not. It does not mean that at all. So they say they begin to break it down. The tribe of Issachar in the Bible. And, a lot of people are fascinated with the Aztecs, and they try to give them an Egyptian origin. Of course, BHIs give them a Israelite origin. They always try to give them an exotic origin because they're fascinated with their culture. They're fascinated with their monuments, their frescoes. Abos of, fascinated that some of them were of the dark variation. So therefore, they say, "Oh, these are our ancestors." So there's a lot of people claiming this. And no one's actually taking the time out to learn genetics so they can understand where these people come from. Anyway, it says Issachar was the 9th-born son of Jacob. His name he is hired. They migrated to the Americas around 536 BC during the Persian captivity. That don't even make sense. Again, there's evidence that the Americas was inhabited and populated long before that, and we're going to get into that. Silly stuff. Genesis 49:1 is the prophecy of Jacob. That's why I named my channel Genesis 49ers, because I was inundated and entrenched in the doctrine of Black Hebrew Israelitism. And this is one of the strong aspects of that, is teaching this 12 tribes chart. Anyway, Issachar is a strong ass couching between two birds. I've heard several explanations of this. One of the explanations is the two birds is North and South America, boom, Mexico's and Mesoamerica, boom. So there is a car. That's one of the arguments. They're giving an argument here about them working. So in the symbol of a burro in Mexico, blah, blah, blah. So this is what they do. They just read a bunch of verses and tell you, hey, this is how we know. This is our DNA and ancestry test, by reading you scriptures and saying, hey, they fit this. Oh, they saw a land that was good to rest. Oh, good for rest. Oh, so that means it's a siesta, even though siesta is a Iberian Spanish concept. But anyway, none of this stuff makes sense. These are just rhetoric arguments, empty rhetoric, not DNA tests. When they talk about sacrifices in the mountains and all that other stuff, and going to Hosea saying the Israelites sacrifice flesh. Like, oh, the Israelites sacrifice flesh. So, the Mexicans, Aztec, we know we got pictures of them sacrificing people and ripping out their heart and eating it. So, therefore, they are the children of Issachar. None of this, how many cults and ancient people practice and stuff that we look at today as taboo? That makes no sense. And that's not, again, these are all cultural arguments. And I remember having discussions about Garfield and his way of thinking of ancestry. It's the same thing. It's trying to find, affinity in culture, and they're saying that culture itself shows ancestral linkage. No, it does not. You got people that live far away from each other in different regions that are not even related to each other that are practicing these similar taboo practices. That does not make them, you know, share common ancestors. Um, and then look at the books they use and are quoted here. Mysteries of Ancient America, the idea of Kingsborough, believing that the Mexicans were Israelites, the lost tribes in Promised Land, thinking that the Judaic character in the old Aztec religion by Duran. And interesting thing about Duran, I think Duran was the first one. Was it Duran was the first one that pointed out that they may have had an East Asian origin. He still believed they were Israelites, but he pointed to an East Asian origin. History of the American Indians by James Adair. I read this entire book by his way. He believes the Mexicans have some kind of semblance of culture. Again, these are all cultural arguments, and their basic ancestry are strictly culture. When we look at the 12 tribes chart real quick, they have here on the website. They have Judah as the American blacks. Again, the central idea of this chart is to say that everybody on this list go back to one man. And again, that one man will be Jacob. That means American blacks, which are already a hodgepodge group. West Indies blacks supposed to be Benjamin. That's another hodgepodge group. Haitians hodgepodge group. Puerto Ricans hodgepodge. Cubans are hodgepodge. Dominicans are hodgepodge. Guatemalans, the Panamanians, and they're trying to equate that with Mayans, hodgepodge group. American Indians, so on and so forth. All these groups are mixed bag. They're all a mixed bag. They don't all share one common ancestor. But today we're going to deal with the Mexicans. So with that being said, we did enough going over what they teach. It's a brief overhaul of what they teach on Issachar and how this is just all silly nonsense. Let's go. Now let's go to some. Let's deal with some real ancestry here in regards to the Mexicans. So watch this, y'all. Let's deal with the Mexican ancestors. Where do they come from? We don't have to invoke some mythical or biblical ancestry for these people. We can just be honest scholars here and deal with their ancestry, right? Diversity of Mexican paternal lineages reflects evidence of migration and 500-year admixture. Introduction. By all accounts, Mexico was the cradle of major Mesoamerican cultures, Olmec, Teotihuacan, Aztec, and Mayan. Colonization by Europeans and the importation of enslaved Africans subsequently influenced the genetic composition of Mexican populations over the past several centuries. So, real quick before I continue, we're already seeing that Mexican people are not all a singular or a homogenous population. Again, Europeans come over. This is basic history. You guys all know Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. Y'all know all this already. It's a simple, basic history. Came over here. You already know about the conquest, Hernan Cortez going into Mexico, 500 people, and defeating the Aztecs. All these things happen. We know they had sex. We know they mixed with the population. This is why it's more common to see Hispanic people, Latino people with indigenous maternal ancestry, meaning their mother's side, versus paternal ancestry, because you've seen a decimation of the men, a reduction of men, and an increase of European men, and these men having sex and reproducing with the indigenous peoples of the Americas. So again, you see an influx of Europeans. You see Africans coming in through slavery. Africans are mixing. They're mixing with the indigenous population. So now you have African Y chromosomes, African male ancestry being introduced into the gene pool. This is a mixed group, and you still have some surviving lineages of the indigenous Aztecs and the indigenous Mesoamericans that lived here prior to. So we're already shown, we're not even that far into this chapter. We've already shown and explicated how and why the 12 tribes chart cannot stand on evidence. You cannot stand, it does not comport with reality because, again, these people are a mixed group, so they all can't share one ancestor, which would be Jacob. Putatively Jacob, this person that lived in the Bronze Age in the Levant. Let's keep going. It says, during this period, most Native Mexican populations experience some degree of admixture. Again, reinforcing the idea that these people are mixed, with gene flow happening largely between indigenous women and European and African men, leading to the formation of the mestizo gene pool. And again, that's what the word mestizo means. It means mixed. As a result of this process, more than 90% of Mexicans are carriers of indigenous paternal lineages. Again, the women are always going to survive conquest. Why are women always going to survive conquest? Because they actually give value and in regards to keeping the progeny of the conquistors or conquistadors alive. Men don't give that value. The value they give is probably going to be in tribute or as tributaries or as slaves or servants. Women give the value as being, okay, you're going to raise my children, right? You're going to teach my children the language of the land, the ways of the land. They're going to provide that. The men are going to work the land. And that's just how it worked. And this is not a concept that is solely of Europeans. That's exclusive to Europeans. This happened in Africa. This happened with the Bantu speaking tribes, right? They did the same exact thing. During the Bantu expansion, same exact thing. You get the local women. And also you get benefits because once you mix into the local population, what happens is all of those, adaptations that they have to fight off certain disease or fight off certain things that are local to the area that you are coming into and invading, your children are going to get those things, those adaptations that they already have. So you don't have to worry about that for your children. So it's stuff like that because they're going to, of course, you're going to mix with them, get those autosomes. They're going to drink the breast milk from that woman, get certain enzymes to help fight those things. Now we getting your mind working here. We're not just telling you verses and telling you, hey, God said and the prophecy said that. We're trying to give you real understanding. And if you did believe in God, then you would believe in being not ignorant in anything small or great. But as we can see, Black Hebrew Israelites are propagating ignorance. They're promulgating ignorance. They want to keep people entrenched in ignorance. When we can clearly see, when we look at the genetic profile of these people and the history and the basic history of the conquest of Mexico and the history of the transatlantic slave trade, that Mexicans are in fact an admixed group. Just like everybody else in that chart, African Americans, heavily admixed group. When you boil all these arguments down, what we're really arguing against is what was known as racial purism. And racial purism comes from scientific racists of the past in 19th century. And many of you will call them rednecks, Ku Klux Klan members. And many of you guys emulate them. You emulate those type of people that spewed evil rhetoric that reinforced the ideas of slavery, kidnapping, and forceful sexual relations. These are the ideas that you're keeping alive with Black Hebrew Israelite ideology. Anyway, it says, whereas they exhibit a great diversity of non-indigenous paternal lineages due to historical events. So when we remember that claim that I read off the website, they believe that Mexicans themselves are Israelites that were exiled. You know, some say the Persian captivity, some say the Assyrian captivity. They always changing their narrative. But nonetheless, they believed that they were exiled and they came over here about 1500 to, 2500 to 2800 years ago. But as we can see, that majority of these people, most of their male ancestry goes back to, at the maximum, 500 years. And most of it is coming from African and European sources. Anyway, I haven't read anything into this chapter yet validating the idea of ancient Israelite ancestry here. It says here the Y chromosome is one of the most useful markers in anthropological, genetic, and genealogical studies. It is acrocentric and represents most 3% of the haploid genome. The Y chromosome has two small pseudoautosomal regions that exhibit homology with regions in the X chromosome and a non-recombining region, NRY. The NRY is uniparentally inherited. This is what I was telling y'all earlier. In order for you to have a Y chromosome, you got it from one parent, and that one parent is going to be the male parent. I know we live in a time of confusion where people don't understand the difference between a woman and a man. We're not going to even argue that today, but it's just weird stuff. But biologically, if you're a man, you would inherit your Y chromosome from one source, and that's your father, your biological father. The NRY is uniparentally inherited, being passed down from father to son without genetic recombination. This is how we know. We're looking at these people. Again, we can see historically that these people are mixed between indigenous, European, and African sources. They're going to share different Y chromosomes. They're going to share different male groups that contribute to that population. Meaning they all can't be from this man that lived beautifully in the Bronze Age. It just does not work that way. We got to use our noggin here, okay? 3 NRY regions also present a wide range of polymorphisms, such as SNPs and short tandem repeats. Set of alleles obtained from Y chromosome, STR, or SNP genotype in a single individual is referred to as a haplotype. Such haplotypes can be used to predict the paternal lineage of haplogroups to which a Y chromosome belongs. So again, that's how we know what group of people that you best fit with is looking at these SNPs and STRs. And the only way you can get these things again is through the act of sex. A man would have to impregnate a woman in order for you to inherit this. You can't get it through osmosis. You can't get it through alien abduction. You get abducted and the alien injects you with this. No, that's not how it works. You got it because a man laid down with a woman, had sex, and conceived you. That's how you got it. This is how we know we can track male ancestry. So if you're claiming that Mexicans, African Americans, and Jamaicans, and South America, all these people group are the same, then they better have the same Y chromosome. The issue is they don't. Ultimately, that tells you that they descend from different male groups of the past. So they all can't be this one group that comes spurs from Jacob. It says here, nowadays it's more common to use SNPs to delineate the haplogroup status of a sample and therefore the geographic origin of a Y chromosome because of their relative evolutionary uniqueness. Excuse me. Individuals sharing such haplogroups and related haplotypes have a common ancestral origin. For example, Gorilla Hebrew. Gorilla Hebrew, after they examined his Y chromosome, it came back as an R1b marker at its own admission. So if it comes back as an R1b marker or R marker, then he shares a common ancestry with most of the males in Western Europe. That's what that's telling you. Because again, the only way he can get that Y haplogroup is sharing ancestry with males that had it before him. And they passed it down through the act of reproduction, the act of sex and conception. And it trickled all the way down to him in present day time. And when he had sex, I know he has children. His male children are going to have that same exact Y chromosome marker, and that's how we're going to track it. And again, that Y chromosome marker that he has is common with most of Western European males. That's his ancestral origin. We can track that. Anyway, with information about the geographic source of Y chromosomes, it becomes possible to reconstruct the admixture process. Therefore, the Y chromosome composition of Mexican mestizos reflects the contribution of paternal lineages from diverse source populations. So, different source populations make up today's Mexicans. So, since there's different ones, then we can't just make the blanket statement and say Mexicans are Issachar. None of that makes any sense. It's all nonsensical Pixar, Disney, Star Wars, Marvel type of logic. And that's an insult to those properties. But anyway, in an effort to illuminate the genetic diversity of Mexican males, we evaluated a compendium of NRY data from previous studies. This data set includes a total of 1,614 unrelated YSTR haplotypes defined by 17 different markers. These haplotypes were obtained from populations inhabiting different geographic regions of Mexico, including the Central Valley of Mexico, Chiapas, Guanajuato, Jalisco, Nuevo Leon, and Yucatan, with CVM including GTO, Puebla, and Querétaro states. Haplogroup assignments was made using Bayesian methods with haplogroup probability assignments less than or equal to 80% being included in the analysis. So let's deal with this diversity. As we can see, it has 17 different markers. That's a lot of diversity. Mexican males exhibited a great diversity of haplotypes. The study population had a mean number of pairwise differences in the mean population of Yucatan. CHIS had the highest NPD values, while Mexican population reflecting a remarkable diversity. Interestingly, these two populations shared very few haplotypes between them, a trend observed across all populations. Overall, Yucatan shared the greatest number of haplotypes with NL at 4% and CVM at 2%, while CHIS shared the most haplotypes with NL and CMV. Yucatan CHIS shared 0.67% of the haplotypes. Urban zones of greatest economic development, notable internal migrations such as JAL and CVM presented the highest BP values. Acuera, so they were more diverse, which makes sense because more people are moving to these regions. Acuera Hernandez and Castillo Ponce, 2015. In the setting, CVM shared haplotypes with NL, GTO, JL, and Yucatan and CHIS. The highly economically developed state of NL exhibited the lowest values, possibly due to the number of haplotypes, less than 6%. That is shared with the other states. Of these, 3.14% within the same region, followed by CVM, Yucatan, CHIS, and GTO. These findings likely reflect the large-scale movements of people seeking employment in the largest cities within. I'm so sorry, y'all. Just bear with me. Within the Mexican national territory. An analysis of molecular variants suggested that the patterns of genetic variation were not strongly related to geography. This finding may reflect the migratory movements that contributed to the genetic architecture of each state. However, certain geographic regions show genetic similarities to each other. For example, the southeastern states of CHIS and Yucatan were closely related, while urban zones presented similar diversity patterns. By contrast, GTO exhibited major differences, with both urban zones and southeastern states being closest to JAL in terms of its patterns of diversity. The similar patterns of genetic diversity in GTO and JAL could explain by the geographic closeness of these regions and the possible sharing of ancestral indigenous roots in pre or post colonial times. Perhaps some importantly, GTO and JAL, together with states of Aguas Calientes, Colima, Nayarit, and Zacatecas in the northwest corner of San Luis Potosi, once constituted the Nueva Galicia Kingdom. The mining industry in GTO, ZAC, and SLP resulted in significant gene flow into Nueva Galicia. It also attracted immigrants from France and England and employed enslaved Africans in the labor force, which explained the presence of haplogroups R1b, E1b1a, E1b1b, and T in the region. So, E1b1a, it's going to be a slave population. Even some of the E1b1b markers could have been slaves, and the T markers. R1b is primarily European. Now, you do have some R1b markers that might be West African, like V88. It says large scale movement of Mohocan natives, i.e., Tarascos, to serve as laborers in mines, as well as population dispersals from ZAC associated with a devastating famine, 1749 to 1750, could have further contributed to the genetic similarities between GTO and JAL. So let's deal with the Y chromosome phylogeography. Overall, Mexican males possess 21 different haplogroups. I want y'all to understand what that means. This is 21 different groups that diverse from each other. They come from 21 different sets of ancient males that live in different periods and epochs of time. So therefore, they all can't be the same. You can't sit up there and just go tell people Mexicans on the tribe of Issachar when we can see that 21 different haplogroups exist amongst these people. They're from 21 different groups that come from, from people that live in different time periods, in different places on the planet Earth that have nothing to do, most of them have nothing to do with the Levantine Basin and the formulation of Israelites. It's way before those times, by the way. All right, anyway, Mexican males possess 21 different haplogroups. The most prominent of these paternal lineages were R1b, being the most representative, right? QM3 and E1B1B. So these are several different groups. R1b coming from mainly the sources coming from Iberian sources. So Portugal and Spain is where you're seeing a lot of these R1b sources coming from. In Mexico, QM3 is a Pan-American haplogroup. This is representing ancient Native American indigenous lineages on the male side, right? So you have QM3 in Mexico, E1B1B being there as well, which we know you have East Africans with E1B1B, you have Europeans with E1B1B, you have North Africans with E1B1B, you have West Africans, even South Africans with E1B1B. So those markers can come from various regions. The European-derived lineages, i.e. R1b, appeared at the highest frequency in the biggest cities in CVM and L, whereas Native American lineages were more prominent in southern Mexican regions. As mentioned earlier, Native American haplogroup Q is commonly seen in mestizo populations of Mexico. In our study, it was most frequent in the southeast states of CHIS and Yucatan, being nearly double the mean frequency in the entire country. These findings highlight the Native American contribution to mestizo genomes in different geographical regions as ascertained with ancestral informational markers. Analysis of the ancestral origins of the first Americans constitutes an enormous challenge due to the extent to which European colonizers genetically transformed Mesoamerican populations. I'm going to read that again. Analysis of ancestral origins of the first Americans constitutes an enormous challenge. Why is it an issue? Because the majority of these people are the product, as we read earlier, of Europeans coming in and mixing, which masked history and masked ancestry, because now you have a sex bias and you have a large contribution of an invasive people that don't come from this region. They come from places like Spain and Portugal and even France and England, as we read earlier. It says this particular issue, going into the origins, is an issue due to the extent to which European colonizers genetically transform Mesoamerican population. So they're introgressing in, they're bringing in their genes that mixing with this population. So a lot of autosomes are going to reflect that, right? It says both pre and post colonization bottlenecks seriously decrease the genetic diversity of indigenous groups. In particular, smallpox, pneumonia, and measles carried by the Spaniards greatly diminished native Mexican diversity. Nonetheless, a remarkable diversity of haplotypes within haplogroup Q has been maintained in contemporary native Mexicans and even among mestizos. Haplogroup Q is the most common and ancient lineage in the Americas. It has evolved into at least 4 sublineages, including QMEH2, QM346, QL54, and QM3. Of these, QMEH2 is a haplogroup restricted to circumpolar population, which is possible presence in Mesoamerican populations being poorly documented. QL54 connects the Native American population with the Albaskan speaking groups in North America and with Altaians and Tuvinians indigenous to Siberia. So, again, when you do find indigenous males of Mexico, some of them, again, this is going to match them with people that live in Siberia. What is this telling you? What is this showing you? If your relatives, your male relatives, live in Siberia and your ancient ones are, putatively Aztecs or Mayans, ancient Mesoamericans, then that's showing you that there's a migration pattern here. Because the males that ancestral males that live in the past that created you and your cousins that live in Siberia, they live somewhere in that region at first, and then their progeny over time made their way into what is known as the Americas today. This is showing you the ancestral origin of these people, that these people come from Northern Asia, as we covered in a video before this. That's the only way you can have ancestors and can have relatives today living in Siberia and, from a Y chromosome standpoint, having their cousins living in Mexico today. That's showing you a migratory route. People don't come from ancient Israel 1,500 years ago, whatever, or 2,500 years ago, whatever the narrative One West is trying to tell you, and these Black Hebrew Israelites are trying to feed you. You can just look at the genes and show that these people migrated. People have sex, they move, migrate. That's what we're seeing here. This is why they have relatives in Northern Asia that are indigenous to Siberia. It says the most common lineage in Mexico and the rest of the Americas, haplogroup QM3, appears in increasing clinal frequency in North to South America. All of these haplogroups were brought to the Americas through the Beringia, and as a result, connect Mexican populations with ancient Asian ancestors. And this is where they ultimately come from, the indigenous side. This is not all Mexicans, because again, Mexicans are diverse. Majority of Mexicans are diverse. But when you do go to the indigenous ones, on the male side, they're always going to connect to their Asian forebears. It says here, furthermore, both QL4 and QM3 have significantly diversified since arriving in the Americas, each having different sublineages within it. So they create their own distinct branches while being in America. This is how we know they've been here longer than what Black Hebrew Israelites are saying, because they have, not only do they share the base group, right, QM3 or QL54, they have their own specific branches on those Y chromosome trees that was created and is distinct and only found on this side of the world. So that means they've been here long enough to develop those mutations on their Y chromosomes and have enough children, have enough generations pass to create those mutations and create their own branches on that specific subclade. Anyway, owing to the limited high resolution studies of haplogroup Q, the exact sublineages carried by Mexican males are yet unknown. However, it is likely that a majority of native Mexican males belong to QM3, followed by QL54, both of which have been reported by prior studies in native and mestizo Mexican populations. Genetic legacy from Iberian Peninsula. So now we're going to get into the European side of Mexicans. We dealt with the ancient Aztec and indigenous side of paternal ancestry, which has nothing to do with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has nothing to do with, Issachar, as they claim. Has nothing to do with that. These are North Asian people that migrate to the Americas. We're talking about prehistory. We're talking about 10,000 years ago, 15,000 years ago, when this stuff is taking place. And again, the mutations on the Y chromosome are showing that they've been there for a while. Anyway, genetic legacy from the Iberian Peninsula. Once the New World was discovered, migrations from the Iberian Peninsula arrived in Mexico via Spanish conquest around 1519. Again, most people know this. This is general knowledge. This is not, Harvard college level stuff. This is regular stuff here. Regular history. We all know this. We know about Hernan Cortez. We know about, Columbus. We know about these things. It says previous studies have pointed out that the first Spanish conquerors came from the southern region of Spain, Andalusia, and Extremadura, likely bringing paternal lineages like R1b with them. So if you have an R1b marker, you're most likely a descendant of one of these people. One of these conquistadors, one of these people that were in these bands, and one of these people that were immigrating from that part of the world at that time. I know everybody wants to play the victim. That's very popular in this community. Everybody's a victim. Everybody, give me my money, pay me restitution because my ancestors were wrong. But a lot of you guys, ancestors were the ones doing the wrong. You're culpable. So instead of asking for money, how about you start paying? How about you start, coming out that purse a little bit, lighten that purse up. Since you demanding money, demanding restitution for what people did in the past. Well, those people are your ancestors. They're the reason you're here. And we know that by studying the Y chromosome. We know where these R1b markers are coming from. I can't wait till we get to the African American section because when we start talking about African American genetics, it's going to piss a lot of you guys off because I know you guys all believe that you all come from Wakanda. Y'all believe that y'all come from the Zulu tribes and the Zulu nation, So you old heads, Yeah, y'all believe that. Y'all believe that y'all come from an imaginary version of Egypt that never existed, that was all black, that had nothing but kings, didn't have any, paupers and nothing like that, didn't have commoners, and it was nothing but king. It was inundated with kings. A lot of you guys believe that, but in reality, we're mixed. We're a mixed group of people. It does not depend on your hair texture. It does not depend on your skin color, your skin gradation of skin, right? Your nose shape, your face shape. None of that matters. Ancestry, your ancestry is your ancestry, no matter how you look. You understand? And those things can change rapidly. So a lot of the people that you're calling Mexican are descendants of Europeans, right? A lot of lion's share, shall I say, descend from Europeans, as we can see with representative of the R1b marker. It says the Andalusian region has an R1b frequency close to 63%, being more prominent in the east compared with the west at 53.4%, while the R1b frequency in Extremadura is at 50%. Geographic zones like the Spanish Pyrenees, the Basque Country, Catalonia also exhibit higher R1b frequencies from the regions described before. By comparison, haplogroup R1b is the most prominent lineage among Central and West European populations, being present in more than 50% of men from these regions. So if you take a DNA test, and this is why a lot of Afrocentrics, a lot of Black Hebrew Israelites, they are opposed to the idea of DNA science. They are opposed to the idea of DNA testing because many of them, as you can see, if you see any Israel United in Christ, demonstration on YouTube or any ISUPK demonstration on YouTube, Sakar, one of the main central themes is to condemn Europeans, European Americans, white Americans. It's to condemn them and say that they're going to be destroyed, that they're going to pay for what their ancestors did, that the Most High is going to kill them, prepare slaughter for their children. They're going to be enslaved. That women are going to be forced into having sex with them. All these things. And be careful what you ask for. That's what I'm going to say. Be careful what you prescribe, because you got a whole tribe of people on your chart claim to be Issachar that have a high percentage and high percent. There's a R1B is very pervasive in that people group. It's a high prevalence of R1B. A lot of those people descend from those people that you condemn. Same thing with African Americans, and we're going to get into that when we get to the section on who y'all try to claim as Judah. A lot of them descend from Europeans. In majority of your YouTube videos, majority of your teaching material is the condemnation of Europeans. Meanwhile, majority of people on that chart, majority of people on 12 Tribes chart, paternally descend from Europeans themselves. I mean, if you take Europeans out of the chart, out of the equation, you don't have a chart. You don't have an African American group, because that's a very large part of the pie. You don't have a Mexican, because that's a very large part of the pie. You don't have an Argentinian, Brazilian. Again, we dealt with this. That is a very large part of the ancestral pie. Right? So you remove the European component, you remove majority of the people, because that is the most dominant component. Oh, man. You understand? So anyway, let's continue on. All these Spanish regions, as well as Aragon and Castilla-La Mancha, show strong similarities to Mexican haplotypes. As seen in this network, several haplotypes of Mexican mestizos are shared with populations from the Iberian Peninsula. This heterogeneous contribution from different peninsular regions of Spain to different Mexican states has clearly increased the haplotype diversity within the R1B in Mexican populations. On a finer scale, some lineages R1B that arose in distinct regions of the Iberian Peninsula, such as R1B3D and R1B3F, are observed in Mexican males. It is also likely that other sublineages, such as R1BDF27, are present in Mexican men, given its substantial frequency in Basque. However, the paucity of high-resolution haplotype studies of this and other paternal lineages make their identification difficult. Nevertheless, a remarkable number of these haplotypes appeared as singletons, suggesting significant diversity within this haplogroup. Now, we dealt with the European aspect of Mexicans. We dealt with the indigenous Mesoamerican aspect of Mexicans. Again, showing diversity. They don't all descend from one group. They all can't go back to Jacob. Now we're going to deal with circum-Mediterranean influences. Like the current Mexican populations from the Iberian Peninsula exhibit a complex genetic background that is influenced by different historical, economic, and religious events, contributing to Spanish biological diversity. Because of the peninsula's geographic position, it is involved in trade routes extending from Eastern Europe, Greeks, the Middle East Phoenicians, and North Africa, Carthaginians, modern Tunisia. The genetic contribution of these cultures has been delineated through phylogeographic studies of haplogroups I, J1, and J2. Before I even finish, so now we're putting I, J1, and J2 into the Mexican group. And what else? This is so poetic. This is poetic justice here. Let me tell you why. Because many Ashkenazi Jews that are also condemned by Black Hebrew Israelites have J1 and J2 markers. Mexicans have J1, J2 markers. And again, if you've been following and listening and understanding and comprehending, you would know that that means that some of the Mexicans, share the same male paternal ancestry as Ashkenazic Jews. So when you condemn the Ashkenazic Jews, you're condemning the people on the chart that you call Issachar. Just letting you know that. They share the same ancestry. So if you're attacking their ancestry, you're attacking theirs. The people you claim to be the 12 tribes. See how that works? It says since the first century AD, Jewish populations were dispersed across the Mediterranean and subsequently occupied north of Spain. The Roman expansion brought with it communities of Jews, some being slaves, that expanded into the rest of the peninsula and then were forcibly converted to Christianity, conversos during the 13th and 14th centuries. Moreover, the barbarian invasion and subsequent occupation by Germanic Visigoths also contributed to Spain's genetic diversity. During the Muslim domination in the 12th to 15th centuries AD, Arabs and Berbers invaded different regions of Spain. Genetic vestiges of these population movements are reflected in the presence of lineages like E, G, shout out to the Tail twins, their haplogroup G2A, I, J, N172, and M267, meaning J1 and J2, and K, which are quite common in the parental population from which the Mexican mestizo arose, i.e., the Spaniards. So basically, what they're saying is some of those Spaniards that came over here were actually products of the Moors. Some of them were products of the Jews and other various Middle Eastern Mediterranean groups like the Greeks. Like the rest of the peninsula, the Andalusian region was influenced by Sephardic Jewish, North African, and Middle East populations, as evidenced by the presence of haplogroups EM81 and V13, GI, and K. The Berber component of the Muslim invasion in the North African gene flow are evidenced by the presence of haplogroup EM78, EM81, and EV12. Other sublineages likely contributed by Middle East populations EV65, as well as Sephardic Jews and Tartars, proto-historical Andalusian civilization, such as EM34, EM123, EM78, and EV13, respectively, are also distributed throughout the peninsula. The complex legacy was observed in all Mexican populations, where different sublineages within E1B1B appeared in the Mexican states. Of note, the Mexican haplotypes reveal some genetic influences from Moroccan, Libyan, and Tunisian populations. The closest of these populations in their genetic similarity to those from EXT and Basque and Galicia could also reflect the Moorish influence in Spain. So again, you do have Mexicans that are E1B1B, and again, some of them could come from slaves, East Africans and whatnot, but also some of them are coming from the Moorish component that was in Andalusia, that was in Spain, coming from these North African territories such as Libya, Morocco, and Tunisia. It says urban zones like NL and CBM had the most populations bearing the EB1B1B lineage and were also fairly close to Spanish regions like N, Basque, and EXT. CHIS and L also showed connections with Libya, Morocco, and Tunisia, possibly reflecting recent migration from urban zones to rural regions of these states. Nonetheless, only CHIS exhibited a slight genetic closeness. Yucatan appeared genetically distinctive from the rest of the states, showing a genetic connection with Sephardic Jews. Again, some of these Mexicans connect to modern day Jews, which these Black Hebrew Israelites that claim to support this chart and promulgate and push this chart, they speak vile about. Meanwhile, there's people on that chart that they claim to be Israelites are their cousins. It says within haplogroup I, the Mexican population shows genetic similarities to populations from different regions of Spain, such as in Basque, EXT, and Galicia. Although Aragon and Asturias also exhibit a presence of this haplogroup. This connection could reflect the geographic origins from which colonial and even post-colonial migrants came. Mexicans with haplogroup J were found mainly in northern state of NL, where the similarities with haplotypes from Libya, Morocco, Oman, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, and Yemen were also seen. The relationship between NL and Middle Eastern populations could also possibly be related to converso Jews. So there's converso Jews in Mexico, the descendants of converso Jews in Mexico. And again, these people condemn Jews all day long. And they got them on a chart, and don't even know it. Arriving during the colonial period when NL played a critical role in their settlement there. Carriers of this lineage were further observed in present-day large cities such as CBM, JAL, possibly as a consequence of significant Lebanese migrations during the during the last century. The frequencies of all these Y chromosome lineages were reinforced by a prior study. However, the present analysis included a greater representation of mestizo populations that had not previously been analyzed. Now, the last component. So we dealt with so far the ancient Mexican, Mesoamerican component, the European component, and then the Mediterranean, Middle Eastern component found in Mexicans. Those are three groups that we already dealt with, showing that these people don't all have the same paternal ancestry. Now we're going to deal with the African imprint on mestizo genomes. This is the last part. Enslaved Africans from Angola, Congo, Gambia, Guinea, Mozambique, and Senegal were brought to Mexico with the Spaniards as a replacement for enslaved native Mexicans due to the drastic population reduction because of the diseases carried by European colonizers. Thus, Africans contributed to genetic diversity of some Mexican genomes. Even so, Y chromosome lineage linked to African ancestry have not yet been broadly documented in the Mexican population. Previous studies using autosomal aims revealed that the African component varied between 6.1 and 8.9%, being more prominent in the coastal regions. Coastal states of JAL and Yucatan presented the highest frequency of haplogroup T, which has been found in Morocco, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Egypt. Haplogroup T also appears in Middle East populations such as Iran, Iraq, Oman, as well as in Spain. Anthropological genetic studies in other Latino populations have further documented the presence of African paternal lineages such as haplogroup B, B2, E1A, E1B1, and E2B1. Given that enslaved Africans were brought to the Colombian Caribbean for their subsequent distribution to the rest of Latin America, it is likely that some of these haplogroups could be also present in Mexican males. Nonetheless, the main legacy from Africa likely came with the Spanish conquerors more so than enslaved Africans, whose contribution to Afro-Mestizo population should be thoroughly analyzed. So that's another group, man. We dealt with 4 different groups that were diverse within themselves that contribute to the Mexican gene pool. These Mexican people are all different. They're all bunched up, hodgepodge group of people. They're diverse. So they all came descend from this man that supposedly lived in the Bronze Age in the Levant. Some of their ancestry comes from North Asia 15,000 years ago. Some of it is the product of the slave trade. Some of it is coming from colonizers. Some of it is coming from recent immigrants. So trying to put one male on a population that huge and diverse is idiotic. Now let's get to the conclusions. Given the indigenous roots of Mexican populations and the range of paternal lineages brought to Mexico by colonizing populations from the Iberian Peninsula, it is not surprising to find a great diversity of Y chromosomes. Remember, in order for that chart to be true, there should be one Y chromosome that these people all trace back to, and that's not the case. There's a great diversity of Y chromosomes, meaning these people descend from a variety of males, a multiplicity of males, not just one single line. Anyway, great diversity of Y chromosome within the Mexican population. It is worth mentioning here that each state presented a distinctive distribution of these haplogroups, possibly due to the demographic events that shaped their genetic makeup. Overall, haplogroups R1b, Q, and E1B1b were the most frequent paternal lineages in Mexican mestizo males. During the historical period, R1b and E1B1b lineages arrived first with Spanish conquest, then with the subsequent immigrations during the colonial period, and more recently, with the exodus provoked by the Spanish Civil War, further enriching Mexican genetic diversity. Nonetheless, the geographic regions where these lineages came from and the subclades to which they belong are partially known. Thus, high-resolution studies should be conducted to more completely reconstruct the historical past of Mexico 500 years after Spanish conquest. These studies could help elucidate the immigrants' geographic origins and better describe the patrilineal genetic architecture of contemporary Mexican men. And that's the motherfucking deal. So again, Mexicans can all descend from a man that lived in the Bronze Age, 3,000 years ago because they have separate male ancestry. How do we know this? They have different Y chromosomes. How do you get a Y chromosome? Through the act of sex and reproduction and copulation. They don't all share the same Y chromosomes. They all can't be Issachar. They are diverse. They have distinct and diverse history. They come from different places, different people, different geographical locations. Some of them come from Iberia. Some come from different various parts of Africa, north, west, east, south. Some come from Mediterranean region. Some of them are of Greek origin. Some of them, are Iberian origin, Spanish origin. Some of them are Mesoamerican indigenous. Some of them do come from Aztecs. Some of them do come from Uto-Aztecan speaking populations, that ultimately comes from North Asia. And that's the motherfucking deal, man. Hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to have y'all accept reality. This channel is here to conform with reality. You guys are against it. And the few that listen, kudos to you. We're not trying to reach the masses. We're trying to take your ass to class. So let's get it, bro. We out. Hopefully y'all learn something. We're going to continue this series, and we're going to keep knocking off everybody on the list, the 12 tribes chart, and refute the entire chart in its entirety. Once I'm finished, we're going to put and culminate this thing into one playlist. It's 7 candlesticks up, and I've been telling you niggas, it ain't a debate. It's a stick up, gang.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, yeah, Ey, hablar mal de mí es mala suerte. Yo no rezo, pero mami lo hace por mí pa' que Dios no me suelte. Mucha lana, muchas damas, mucho hater, porque estamos arriba, estamos arriba, estamos arriba. Ey, ey, la envidia no nos derriba, loco, porque estamos arriba, estamos arriba, estamos arriba. Ey, ey, mano arriba, mano arriba.
Money, baby, Young Kings, ey. Estamos arriba, ahora vestimos con marcas exclusivas. Tratamos las Balenciagas como Adidas. Hay par de cabrones que quisieran mi vida. Las baby llegando al lobby, nosotros en la suite. Ya no hay que pedir el sí, leyenda la que nací. El precio sube cada vez que preguntan por fin. Y ya se me dio por fin, yo a nadie me le torcí. Todos los que se viraron ahora están arrepentidos. Mis versos parecen kilos, multimillón me retiro. Y siempre que voy pa' la calle, bendición jamás les pido. Líbrame del agua mansa, Dios, yo del otro me cuido. Estoy arriba los kayak, trepado en la estatua de la libertad. Y el yate ready pa' cuando de esto me quiera desconectar. Futuro brillante por delante que a algunos les puede molestar. Por eso ahora estas mujeres hasta piden por detrás.
¿Por qué? Porque estamos arriba, estamos arriba, estamos arriba. Ay, ay, la envidia no nos derriba, loco, porque estamos arriba, estamos arriba, estamos arriba. Ay, ay,
la envidia no nos derriba, papi, porque estamos arriba, estamos arriba, estamos arriba, ey. Seguiré matando la liga hasta que papá Dios decide. Y todas estas putas se quieren trepar arriba, ey. Trepar arriba.
Ellos saben ya. Les trajo un flow nuevo pa' que le den copy. Un piquete cabrón desde que yo era un popi. Me miran raro como caco dentro de Hot Topic. Ninguno sale con Tito y mucho menos Yopi. Y aquí nadie le importa con quién tú te pases. Lo mío es dar jonrón pa' vaciar las bases. Te hace falta el amor, te hace falta clase. Y yo reputón desde las botas hasta las sunglasses. Te tenemos en los echados, le pasé por la escuchao. Soy lo más hijueputa que has escuchado, ey. Yo siempre picheo y conmigo se van ponchados, ey. Mi recorta limpio, pues nadie me lo ha manchado, ey. Ey. Yo brillo y ellos se muerden. Si quieres te enseño cómo es que se hace. Que hablen mal de mí no me sorprende. Que Dios me los bendiga como quiera. Estamos arriba, estamos arriba, estamos arriba.
Estamos arriba, ey. La envidia no nos derriba, papi, porque estamos arriba, estamos arriba, estamos arriba, ey.
Pongan la copa para arriba, ¿por qué? Porque no nos derriba, loco, porque estamos arriba, estamos arriba, estamos arriba.
Estamos arriba,
ay, mano arriba, mano arriba.